Alrighty, welcome back to Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today we've got some more Quarantine by Greg Egan, and it continues to not be that kind of quarantine. I promise. You've already had hints. Actually, we've had it fairly roundly explained at this point. I do have to keep reminding myself that I have to remember for the epilogue to read Egan's explanation of what he was doing. I will probably forget, but I hope I don't, because it's going to be like another month before I'm done with this at this rate. I got to do a kind of short one today. I got some stuff going on. So this one will not be especially long. This is not going to be a long sesh. But it ends nicely at part 2. The one after that, I think, is when the chapters get rather shorter, and I can do like 3 or 4 of them out of whack, if memory serves. Things will get better. This is taking longer for me to get through than I'd hoped, but it's mostly schedule conflicts. Okay, so previously on, our protagonist, whose name is, well, I have like the weirdest mental block on this guy's name. Stavrianos. His name's Stavrianos, but I don't remember his first name, which does not help me. In any case, he's traveled to New Hong Kong uh, in order to find Laura Andrews, or at least her body, because it looks like she's probably dead, or at least in a state of apparent death, because it looks like she was shipped in a coffin. So he's looking for her and her erstwhile kidnappers. He is not sure who they are. However, along the way, we learn more about his sordid backstory, such as well as the backstory of kind of the state of affairs in the world he lives in. Uh, Including he and his friend's brave, valiant attempt or defense of a port from a reprogrammed agricultural robot, I think it was. And they managed to stop its rampage, but because the people who did what they did to make that happen are complete psychos, um, they had many of them all across the world, and things did not go as well in other places. Um, Ultimately, this leads up to him being branded a hero, and then somebody taking unkindly to this and planting a bomb above his bed, which he manages to avoid by sheer luck and happenstance. His wife, however, dies. So we learn how his wife died. And we also learn a big part of the subtext is that he has a significant amount of self-loathing because of the chemical mix or reprogramming fixes that he as a cop had, making him feel more of a impassive, pragmatic. Here, I'll even read the. I'll read the last bit of the chapter. I walked over to a window and looked out at the brightly lit street. Ever since the bubble, it seemed to me, streetlights had been growing more powerful year by year. 2 cyclists rode by. The window pane shattered outward, and I followed the shards through the empty frame. Unbidden, the priming mods snapped into life. I curled up and rolled as I hit the ground. P4 saw to that. I lay on the grass for a second or two, bleeding and winded. I could hear the flames behind me. I could feel my heart accelerate and my skin grow cold as P1 shut down peripheral circulation. a controlled version of the natural adrenaline response. But I was insulated from my body's agitation. I had no choice but to remain calmly analytic. I got to my feet and turned around to assess the situation. Tiles from the roof were scattered on the lawn. The bomb must have been in the ceiling, close to the back of the house, probably right above the bedroom. I could see patches of a bubbling, gelatinous substance sliding down the remnants of the inside walls, carrying with it sheets of blue flame. I knew that Karen was dead. Not injured, not in danger. With nothing to shield her from the blast, she would have died instantly. I've thought about it a great deal since, and I always reach the same conclusion. Any ordinary person in the same situation would have run back in, would have risked their life. In shock, confused, disbelieving, would have done the most dangerous and futile thing imaginable. But the zombie Boy Scout knew there was nothing he could do, so he just turned and walked away. And, knowing the dead were beyond his help, he turned his attention to the needs of the survivor. So, definitely no internalized self-hate and resentment there. No siree, Bob. Definitely not. How could you think that? He feels guilty as hell for a number of reasons. Partly because he took the highly publicized promotion that his heroic efforts beforehand had netted him, and thus made him a made him noticed, um, and which caused the bomb to be planted in the first place, and partly because he feels like he didn't react in the way he should have reacted. He feels guilty. Loss. He's dealing with grief. That's a lot of what this book is about, is dealing with grief and loss. Or not dealing with it in the case of somebody who has a digital ghost of their wife implanted in them, as he does. He's dealing with it, probably. Alrighty. Uh, let's get cracking. Just give me a sec to get a sip of water here, and we'll start banging out the next two chapters, which, again, not very long. This is going to be a very short one today. Incidentally, my apologies to anybody who's been trying to type at me. I have not seen it because I was dumb and forgot to put my chat scraper up. Sorry. So if you're out there, hi. I'm not. It's not that I am ignoring you. It's that I literally didn't see that you typed anything. So if you're out there, say hello. All right. Chapter 3. I try, and fail, to think of a single compelling reason why the children can't be involved. Abducting brain-damaged mental patients conceived on Bubble Day may not be something they've done before, but no doubt there's a dearth of suitable candidates. And, short of an actual precedent, the whole absurd crime does have an undeniable, childlike ring to it. That's with a capital C, because the children are the children, with a capital T and C, respectively. Um, I will try to emphasize that and make it obvious, but I don't always succeed. Let's just read the entire paragraph over. I try, and fail, to think of a single compelling reason why the children can't be involved. Abducting brain-damaged mental patients conceived on Bubble Day may not be something they've done before, but no doubt there's a dearth of suitable candidates. And, short of an actual precedent, the whole absurd crime does have an undeniable childlike ring to it. It's also true that the children aren't known to have been active in New Hong Kong. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a cell here, a safe house smuggled somewhere in the city. Oh, whoops, a safe house somewhere in the city. As few as 4 or 5 people could have smuggled Laura in. Smuggled Laura in. I'm having difficulty enunciating today. I pace the room, trying to stay calm. I feel more indignation than fear, as if my client should have known about this and warned me from the start. That's absurd, but the fact remains. I'm not being paid enough to fuck with terrorists, least of all the children. They may not have deigned to make a second attempt on my life, a policy they seem to apply to all chance survivors, as if refusing to acknowledge failure. But I have no intention of reminding them of my existence, let alone providing them with a whole new reason to put me back on their hit list. I call the airport. There's a flight out at 6. I book a seat. I pack. It all takes a matter of minutes. Then I sit on the bed, staring at my suitcase. And gradually, I start to regain a sense of perspective. So, Laura was conceived on, or close to, Bubble Day. But is that information or noise? Law enforcement bodies around the world have programmed computers to tirelessly pursue the children's obsessions dates, numerology, heavenly conjunctions, ad nauseum. And the results have always been the same overflowing files full of spurious correlations and meaningless coincidences. Terabytes of junk. One way or another, about 20% of everything can be made to look potentially significant to the children. The fraction of this that's genuine is infinitesimal. In practice, the method is about as useful as considering everyone with eyes the same color as Marcus Dupre's to be a suspected terrorist. No doubt any member of the children, if told of Laura's date of conception, would ascribe great significance to her abduction. But to treat that as proof of their involvement is ludicrous. The question is not, what does this signify to the question is not, what does this signify to the children? For the children seem to have played a part in every single crime worldwide in which they would discern some cosmic portent. Dupre's following. Whoa. Oh, okay. Okay. I see what I did wrong here. Give me a sec. Emphasis. Emphasis frag is very important, and when you screw it up, it ruins everything. Especially when I'm reading like maybe one line ahead of where my mouth is. Okay. Let's try this again. No doubt any member of the children, if told of Laura's date of conception, would ascribe great significance to her abduction. But to treat that as proof of their involvement is ludicrous. The question is not, what does this signify? Oh, Christ. The question is not, what does this signify to the children? For the children to have played a part in every single crime worldwide in which they would discern some cosmic portent, Dupre's following would need to have been underestimated by a factor of about 1,000,000. This sentence is killer. This paragraph is killer. Running away would be pathetic. So is that the question is not as in not ludicrous, or the question is not this question? I think it is the question is not this question. No. No. Okay. The question is not ludicrous. Very good. Okay, sorry about this. This is the difficulty of reading stuff that's actually for a better than like fifth grade reading level. Not to put too fine a point on it. This is why I love Greg Egan and CJ Cherry, because they are not writing for the lowest common denominator. They are writing for people who have experience in reading. And man, sometimes when it's been a long morning, this is not the easiest thing to get reading to, especially reading aloud, because you can read it in your head one way, and that's fine, that's a valid take. But reading it aloud has a whole set of strictures, and I have digressed for like 5 minutes on this one paragraph. Okay, so we're going to do this paragraph, and no matter how I read it, the take is going to be final. All right? All right, let's go. Hoi polloi. No doubt any member of the children, if told of Laura's date of conception, would ascribe great significance to her abduction, but to treat that as proof of their involvement is ludicrous. The question is not, what does this signify to the children? For the children to have played a part in every single crime worldwide in which they would discern some cosmic portent, Dupre's following would need to have been underestimated by a factor of about 1,000,000. Running away would be pathetic. Still, I have nothing to lose but money. I could err on the side of caution. I could drop the case regardless. Yeah, and I could join the ranks of people so cowed by the children's atrocities that they hunt obsessively through the patterns of their lives in search of danger signs, and lock themselves in their homes on every anniversary of every petty stage of Dupre's lukewarm, bloodless martyrdom, observing the holy days of their own religion of fear. I unpack. It's almost sunrise. Lack of sleep, as it often does, has left me with a peculiar feeling of clarity, a sense of having broken free of the mind's ordinary cycle, having reached a profound new relationship with the world. I invoke Boss to force my endocrine system back into phase, and the delusion soon evaporates. Compared to lightning bolt revelations of terrorist involvement, the information I've assembled so far looks hopelessly ambiguous. But I have to start somewhere, and Biomedical Development International is the only company on the list without a blatantly innocent reason to be buying the cluster of drugs that Laura needs. And if BDI has no shareholders to impress, and hacking is too risky, I'm going to have to use more direct means to find out exactly what it is that they're researching. I take a small box from my suitcase and open it gently. Nestled in tissue paper, a mosquito is sleeping. I lack the specialist mod used to program the insect, but a second compartment of the box contains a ROM, bearing old-style sequential software which will let me do the job, albeit more slowly. I lift out the chip and switch it on. It glows invisibly in modulated infrared, and bioengineered IR transceiver cells, scattered throughout the skin of my hands and face, collect and demodulate the signal. RedNet, Neurocom, $1,499, receives the nerve impulses from these cells and decodes and buffers the data. I pass the program to Von Neumann, Continental Biologic, $3,150. Simulating a general-purpose computer isn't something a neural network does with great efficiency, hence the need for specialized mods, physically optimized for their tasks instead of a single programmable computer in the skull. But nobody can afford to buy every mod on the market, and you'd probably impair normal brain function if you commandeered that many neurons. So, quaint as it may be, sometimes loading a ROM full of sequential software is the only practical solution. Culex explorator is purely organic, but heavily modified, both genetically and post-developmentally. Most of the genetic tampering is simply to give the mature insect enough neurons for the nanomachines to rewire, plus its own IR transceivers, of course. I select the behavioral parameters I want from the menus in my head, wait 5 minutes while the program encodes them into the language of the mosquito's neural schemata, then cup my hand over the box for maximum signal strength and ram my decisions into the insect's tiny brain. There are endless layers of error checking in the RedNet protocol, but I run a full readback of the data anyway, which confirms success. On my way to the underground, the streets are already far from empty. Food vendors stand by steaming barrows, and customers flock to them, ignoring the seductively photographed, but olfactorily barren, holographic temptations of dispensing machines. I buy a bag of noodles and eat as I walk. Sharply dressed executives, bankers, and data brokers stride past me, people who could easily work from their homes, who could operate entirely within their own skulls, and even, with the help of mods, choose to enjoy it. It's hard to admit that the sight of these umbrella-wielding infocrats hurrying by, radiating self-importance, strikes me as some kind of affirmation of the human spirit. The light suddenly dims, and I look up to see two layers of churning gray cloud racing each other across the sky. Seconds later, I'm drenched. The R&D heart of New Hong Kong lies 20 kilometers to the west of the city center. I emerge from the underground into an almost deserted world of sprawling concrete buildings, set in lawns so perfect that if they're real, they might as well not be. The sense of space here seems almost scandalous after the city's crowds and towers. Many of the labs and factories are 15 or 20 stories high, but the streets are wide enough, the grounds sufficiently spacious, to keep the architecture from crowding out the sky. Mercurially, already blue again from horizon to horizon. I pause to shake Culex out of its box onto my palm. It clings to the skin. I hold it up to my eyes. I can just make out the tiny specks of the 12 data chameleons adhering to the sides of the thorax. I curl my fingers into a loose fist before setting off again. It takes a certain effort to adopt a casual gait with $20,000 worth of counter-security equipment in the palm of your hand. The maze-like region to the north of the underground bears all the hallmarks of having once consisted of a number of distinct, self-consciously constructed science parks, which have since overflowed into the space between. Each must have had its own orderly, if bizarre, avant-garde street plan, with its own peculiar symmetries and hierarchies, and each has had some degree of success in propagating the pattern beyond its original boundaries. But where two or more incompatible designs have come into conflict, the result can only be described as pathological. BDI itself lies at the end of a cul-de-sac, which precludes a nonchalant stroll past the front entrance. But the whole area is such a capillaceous mass. Capillaceous? Capillaceous, yes. Like made of capillaries. But the whole area is such a capillaceous mass of tiny streets on disconnected branches that I should be able to get close enough to the rear of the building while seeming to be headed somewhere else entirely. The streets are quiet. I can even hear birdsong. One passing cyclist gives me a puzzled second glance. There seem to be no other pedestrians about, and I feel, prematurely, like a trespasser. These may be public streets, but they all lead to a small number of private destinations. In the unlikely event that someone stops to offer me directions, I'll just have to do my best lost idiot tourist act. Finally, I catch sight of what I hope is BDI, an off-white concrete shoebox 100 meters away, visible through the gap between transgenic eco-control and industrial morphogenesis. I can't actually see any identifying sign or logo from this angle, but I double-check against the street map in my head, and there's no doubt that I have the right building. I catch myself thinking, an unlikely front for the children of the abyss, and I laugh aloud at this reassuring observation. The children are not involved, and I don't need to look for excuses to believe that. The biggest risk I face from BDI is that they'll turn out to have nothing to do with the kidnapping at all. I paste a copy of my visual field into the image buffer of the Culex program. I mark the building clearly, then pulse this final message to the insect itself. I raise my hand and open my palm. The mosquito rises at once, circles above me a couple of times, and then vanishes. I spend most of the day examining the information that's publicly available about BDI's owner, Wei Pailing. I dutifully plow I bleh. I dutifully plow through 25 years of news system coverage. He averages about 6 articles a year, but I find nothing remarkable. The only report that's not strictly business news is the opening of a new wing of the NHK Science Museum. Wei led the consortium which raised the funds, and the article quotes from his platitudinous speech. Our children's future relies on stimulating their intellects and imaginations from the earliest age. It strikes me that Wei has no visible interest in any company old enough to be the cause of Laura's condition. He's only in his early 50s, and he seems to have preferred founding new businesses to indulging in takeovers. Of course, that proves nothing about BDI's clients. By late afternoon, I'm growing short of productive distractions. My irrational fears about the children keep resurfacing. I know exactly how to banish them, but I don't want to do that. Not yet. I flick on the HV in the middle of an advertisement. I flip channels to no avail. Panverts don't involve active collusion between rival broadcasters. Perish the thought. All stations just happen to have introduced the practice of allowing advertisers to specify the time slots they want to the nearest hundredth of a second. I could switch right out of real time and search for something to download, but it doesn't seem worth the effort when all I want to do is kill time. A young man is saying, "Lack purpose and direction? Axon has the answer. Now you can buy the goals you need. Family life, career success, material wealth, sexual fulfillment, artistic expression, spiritual enlightenment." As he speaks each phrase, a cube containing an appropriate scene materializes in his right hand, and he tosses it into the air to make room for the next, until he's effortlessly juggling all six. For more than 20 years, Axon has been helping you to attain life's riches. Now we can help you to want them. After catching the last half hour of an incomprehensible, but visually stunning, surrealist thriller, I switch the HV off and pace the room, growing steadily more apprehensive. My rendezvous with Culex is still 4 hours away. Why put up with 4 more hours of boredom and anxiety? For the masochistic thrill of enduring real human emotions? Fuck that. I had my dose of that this morning and nearly walked away from the case. I invoke P3. Sometimes the feel-good subtext is more blatant than usual. Primed is the right way to be. Quick thinking, rational, efficient, free of distractions. It's all perfectly true, although, ironically, the analytic frame of mind that P3 encourages makes it hard to me for gloss over makes it hard for me to gloss over the fact that this attitude is imposed arbitrarily. Just about every mod which alters the personality comes with an axiomatic assertion that using this mod is good. Critics of the technology call this self-serving propaganda. Proponents say that it's simply an essential measure to prevent potentially disabling conflict, a kind of safeguard against a metaphorical mental immune response. Unprimed, I tend to accept the cynical position. Primed, I acknowledge that I lack the data and expertise to evaluate these arguments decisively. I spend 10 minutes reviewing all that I know about the case so far. I'm struck with no new insights, which is no great surprise. P3 eliminates distractions and makes it easier to focus the attention, and thus to reason more swiftly, but it doesn't grant any magical increase in intelligence. The other priming mods all provide various facilities. P1 can manipulate the user's biochemistry, P2 augments sensory processing, P4 is a collection of physical reflexes, P5 enhances temporal and spatial judgment, P6 is responsible for coding and communications. But P3's role is largely that of a filter, selecting out the optimal mental state from all of the brain's natural possibilities and inhibiting the intrusion of modes of thought which it judges inappropriate. There's nothing to do now but wait. So, incapable of boredom, untroubled by pointless fears, I wait. I return as near as I can to the point of release, but there's no need for precision. The mosquito finds me by scent, and would have shunned a stranger standing on the very same spot. It lands on my palm for an infrared debriefing. The mission has been successful. For a start, Culex found its own route in and out of the building. No need to ride in on a human back, and no problem returning now. Inside, it located the security station, traced a bundle of cables to the ceiling, then found a way into the conduit and planted the 12 chameleons. Then it went exploring more widely. The software is grinding away in the background right now, converting the data it gathered into a detailed layout of the building. Finally, it checked back with the chameleons, who'd cracked the security system's signal validation protocol, and reported that, after sampling all 35 cables, they'd identified 12 by means of which a useful set of contiguous blind spots could be created. I view eidetic snapshots extracted from the mosquito's brain, processed into a form which betrays no hint of their origin in compound eyes. No big surprises. Technicians. Computers. Assorted equipment for biochemical analysis and synthesis. No sign of any bedridden patients, though by now Laura might be on her feet, and I have no idea what she'd look like. The late Han Su Lin, possibly, but I wouldn't count on it. Close-ups of workstation screens show flow diagrams of laboratory processes, schematics of protein molecules, DNA and amino acid sequence data, and several neural maps. But the maps aren't labeled with anything enlightening, like Andrews, space L, or congenital brain damage study number 1. Just meaningless serial numbers. The layout of the building is completed. I wander through it in my mind's eye. 5 stories, 2 basements, offices, labs, storerooms, 2 elevators, 2 stairwells. There are several regions coded pale blue for "no data," where Culex couldn't penetrate unaided, and had no opportunity to hitch a ride. The largest by far, 20 meters square, lies in the middle of the second basement. This could be some kind of special facility, a clean room, a cryogenic store, a radioisotopes lab, a biohazard area. People would enter such places rarely, with most of the work being done via remotes. But the snapshots show only a drab white wall and an unmarked door. No biohazard or radiation warnings. No signs of any kind. The chameleons are pre-programmed for 2 a.m., just in case the place turned out to be mosquito-proof after hours. But now there's no need to stick to that schedule. I send Culex back in to tell them to activate in 7 minutes' time at 11:55. Chameleons are too small to receive radio signals, which is probably just as well. Radio is bad security. Tell that to the Russian army. Invading Ukraine. As I approach the building, I pass the layout to P2, which superimposes it over my real vision. Fields of view of surveillance cameras and regions monitored by motion detectors glow with faint red auras. It's tempting to think of this as danger rendered visible, as if some mod in my head could magically sense the action of each security device. But in truth, it's nothing but a theoretical map, which may or may not be complete and correct. At 11:55:00, I switch 12 patches of red to black, purely as a matter of faith. I have no proof that these blind spots have actually come into existence. If not, though, I'll soon find out. The perimeter fence is barbed, and my field meter says that the top strands are electrified at 60,000 volts, well within the threshold of the insulators in my gloves and shoes. The barbs look wickedly sharp, but they'd have to be studded with industrial diamonds, and spinning at a few thousand RPM, to make much impression on the composite fibers in my gloves. I swing myself over and clamber down, hitting the ground as softly as I can. There are adjacent motion detectors still active, and I don't know their sensitivity. I slice open a ground floor window and slip into an unlit room, a lab of some kind. P2 adapts my vision rapidly to maximum sensitivity, for what that's worth, but it's Culex's map that helps me navigate past obstacles at a reasonable speed. Fixed obstacles, that is. Whenever I see a chair or a stool outlined in my ghost vision, I slow down and reach out to ascertain its current position. The corridor, too, is in darkness, but I see red not far to my left as I leave the lab, and a second region still under surveillance comes within a centimeter of the doorway to the stairs. I'm about to turn the handle when I realize that the elbow-shaped door closing mechanism is on the verge of poking into the danger zone. P5 makes it clear that I don't stand a chance of squeezing through the permissible crack. I reach up and snap the device at the joint, then fold the two limp halves flush against the door. I descend to the lower basement. The chameleons have done their best to give me the widest possible access to every floor, but this place seems to have been sparsely protected to start with. With no live cameras nearby to catch the spill, I risk using a flashlight, bringing detail to my Ghost Vision's wireframe sketch. There are bulk containers of solvents and reagents, a row of horizontal freezers, a centrifuge sitting against the wall, opened up and spilling circuit boards as if in mid-repair or mid-cannibalization. I reach the no data region. It's a large, square room, oddly adrift in the middle of an area that's otherwise undivided, and it looks, and smells, like a recent construction. But if Laura is in there, why would they have gone to so much trouble to house her? Not to keep her discreetly hidden, that's for sure. This ad hoc prison, if that's what it is, could hardly be more conspicuous. I circle the room. There's only one door in. The lock is no great challenge. A little probing and then one carefully directed magnetic pulse is all it takes, inducing a current in the circuit that operates the release mechanism. I draw my gun, pull the door open, and find myself staring at another wall, just 2 or 3 meters away. I step through cautiously. The space between the walls is empty, but the second wall fails to join up with the first, on either side. Before going any further, I close the door behind me and plant a small alarm at the top of the frame. When I reach the corner on my right, it's clear that the two walls are concentric. I keep going, and around the next corner there's a door in the inner wall. The lock is of the same cheap design as the first. I wish I knew the point of this bizarre setup, but I can worry about that later. What matters right now is whether or not Laura is buried in here, somewhere. I open the second door, and the answer is no, but there's a bed, unmade since it was last slept in, the bedclothes drawn back on one side where the occupant presumably slipped out. A toilet, a sink, a small table, and chairs. On the far wall there's a mural of flowers and birds, just like the one in Laura's room at the Hilgeman. The bed is still faintly warm. So where have they taken her in the middle of the night? Perhaps she's suffered complications and they've had to move her to a hospital. I spend 30 seconds exploring the room, but there's nothing much to examine. The mural, though, says it all. Laura was here just minutes ago. I'm sure of that. It's pure bad timing that I've missed her. And she may still be in the building. Upstairs, undergoing a midnight brain scan? BDI may be so eager to complete their contract, whatever that entails, that they're working around the clock. Leaving the inner room, I almost turn right, retracing my steps, taking the shortest route out. But then I change my mind and decide to complete my circumnavigation of the gap. The woman, standing just around the corner, leaning wearily on a walking frame, looks exactly like Haljan. She glances up at me and bursts into tears. I step forward quickly and administer a tranquilizing nasal spray. She goes limp. I catch her under the arms and put her over my shoulder. Not the smoothest ride, but I'm going to need my hands free. The walking frame is a good sign. She may not be entirely recovered, but no doubt she can be moved without too much harm. Once I've got her out of the building, I can call for an ambulance, while I'm cutting a hole in the fence. I'm 3 paces out of the second doorway when a male voice behind me says calmly, "Don't turn around. Drop the gun and the flashlight and kick them away." As he speaks, I feel a small, sharply defined patch of warmth alight on the back of my skull, an infrared laser on minimum strength. This is more than a palpable warning that I'm targeted. If the weapon is on auto, the beam's scatter is being monitored, and any sudden movement on my part would trigger a high-intensity pulse in a matter of microseconds. I comply. "Now put her down, carefully, then put your hands on top of your head." I do it. The laser tracks me smoothly all the way. The man says something in Cantonese. I invoke déjà vu for a translation. What do you want to do with him? A woman replies, I'll put him out of it. The man says, in English, Please keep very still. The woman moves in front of me, holstering a gun. From a pouch on her belt beside the holster, she produces a small hypodermic capsule. Stepping over Laura, she takes hold of my jaw with one hand. I lower my heart rate, slides the needle into a vein in the side of my neck. I constrict blood flow to the area, then squeezes the capsule. Reduced circulation will buy me a few seconds, at best, but that should be long enough for P1 to make an assessment. If this is a substance that the mod can neutralize, then now is the time to move. Unless the plan is to incinerate me when I slump under the drug's effects, the laser must be off auto. If I feign loss of consciousness, stumble, swing the woman around as a shield, take her gun, but P1 gives no report. I try to twitch a finger and fail. A moment later, I black out. So, after all the jargon and world building and stuff, we actually have plot movement. How about that? Some of his novels are pretty wordy. One of the reasons I like Greg Egan's short stories is they're either entirely exercises in world building or uh, they tend to be punchier. Um, this gets less true the farther along you go. Some of his short stories are fairly long, particularly in like what's the name of it? Either Oceanic or Instantiation, both of which are short story collections of his. There are some short stories that are like the length of a small novel. Like Oceanic is incredibly long, and Instantiation has like one or two-parters that are pretty beefy. All right, moving right along. Chapter 4. I wake, lying on my side on a concrete floor, naked. My arms are aching, but when I try to move them, cool metal presses against my wrists. I look around. I'm in a small, narrow storeroom, lit by a single high window. My hands are cuffed behind me to a shelving rack, packed with laboratory glassware, which runs the length of the wall. P5 has lost track of my location. It relies on a mixture of perceptual cues, balance sense, and proprioception. Proprioception, which is accurate to the millimeter when you're conscious and moving on foot, but totally useless when you've been knocked out and lugged somewhere. It does claim to have kept the time, though. 15:21, January 5th. The clocks in several other mods agree, and I doubt that the drug would have screwed them all up identically. In 15 hours, I could have been moved anywhere on the planet. Anywhere, that is, judging from the light, where it's mid-afternoon or mid-morning. Okay, let's try that sentence again. In 15 hours, I could have been moved anywhere on the planet. Anywhere, that is, judging from the light, where it's mid-afternoon or mid-morning at 15:21 Central Australian Time. Belatedly, it occurs to me to scan the layout of the building in my head for any rooms with matching dimensions, and I find one on every floor. Culex saw nothing worthy of photographic snapshots in any of them, but the wireframe outlines it recorded indiscriminately are detailed enough to place me on the fourth floor. I'm wearing two pairs of handcuffs. One pair has been threaded through a slot in one of the shelving rack's vertical supports. The shelves aren't anchored to the wall, and just shifting my weight slightly sets the glassware rattling. I could try working the chain of the cuffs against the edge of the slot, but even if I'm not under surveillance, all that's likely to achieve is an avalanche of glass. Okay, let's try that sentence again so that the emphasis on the right syllable makes any sense. This keeps happening to me, and I don't know why. I don't know why I'm having so much difficulty. I could try working the chain of the cuffs against the edge of the slot, but even if I'm not under surveillance, all that's likely to achieve is an avalanche of glass. See, that's how you emphasize. Jeez, Frag. Okay, I'm stuck here. So, who am I dealing with? It's still possible that BDI are exactly what they claim to be. Contract biomedical researches. Research. Bleh. But, ah. I tried to reread one word, then my brain was like, let's read all the wrong ones. It's still possible that BDI are exactly what they claim to be. Contract biomedical researchers, who happen to have no qualms about kidnapping. Hired by the drug company whose product damaged Laura in utero 33 years ago. Company X would be taking a risk by involving outsiders, but maybe less of a risk than trying to deal with Laura in-house. Company X may have plenty of loyal staff, but presumably only a few of them are criminals, whereas BDI might specialize in just this kind of thing. It all sounds as plausible as ever, even if the list of facts it fails to explain is growing longer. Casey's testimony, the architecture of the basement room, Laura roaming the gap between the walls of her custom-made prison, all of which suggest an alternative which might explain everything, and which doesn't sound plausible at all. Laura really did escape from the Hilgaman, unaided, twice. That was why she was abducted. Somebody found out, somebody who believed they could make good use of her talents. That was what the double-walled room was all about. A test for an idiot escapologist. Escapologist? I'm not actually sure how that's pronounced. I don't think I've ever heard it spoken out loud. Not in recent memory, anyway. A test for an idiot escapologist. Somebody who escapes things. And when I ran into her, she was halfway through passing that test. What brought the guards down on us last night? Obviously, I triggered some kind of alarm, but unless the chameleon screwed up, the room wasn't under surveillance by any device linked to the building's security station. If Laura was being treated, not as a routine security problem, but as the subject of an experiment, it wouldn't be surprising if she was being monitored by a different system entirely. Why are BDI making neural maps? It has nothing to do with disputing liability for congenital brain damage. They're trying to identify the pathways that make Laura the greatest thing since Houdini, in the hope of encoding her talents in a mod. Why did they smuggle her out as a corpse, not a passenger with a puppet mod? Because they didn't want to screw around with her brain and risk destroying the very thing that made her worth abducting. It all fits together perfectly. The only trouble is, I just can't swallow it. What hypothetical talent could Laura possess that would enable her to break out of locked rooms without tools of any kind? Postulating an intuitive grasp of security devices is dubious enough, but what could anyone, however gifted, do to a lock or a surveillance camera with their bare hands? 200 years of research says telekinesis does not exist. The human body's minute electromagnetic fields, even if they were controllable, are about 1,000,000 times too weak to be of the slightest use in picking an electronic lock. No amount of fortuitous brain damage could change that, any more than reprogramming a computer in some novel way could give it the power to levitate. So how did she get out? I'm still pondering this when the door opens. A young man tosses a bundle of clothes onto the floor beside me, then draws a gun and a remote control and aims the latter at the handcuffs. I quickly activate RedNet in the hope of capturing the exchange. The cuffs fall open, but I pick up nothing. The frequency used must be outside the range of my transceiver cells. The man stands in the doorway with the gun trained on me. Please get dressed. I recognize the voice from last night. The expression on his face is matter of fact, with no trace of smugness or belligerence. No doubt he has behavioral optimization mods of his own. The clothes are brand new and fit perfectly. P3 vetoes anything but stoicism at the loss of all the equipment I had stashed in the hidden pockets. Even so, for a moment after I'm dressed, some part of my brain flashes redundant warnings at the absence of the usual inventory of reassuring lumps. Put on one pair of handcuffs, behind your back. When I've done this, he blindfolds me. Then he guides me out of the room, walking beside me, gripping the chain of the cuffs with one hand, holding the gun to the side of my chest with the other. I hear little along the way. Snatches of conversation in Cantonese and English, passing footsteps on the carpet, equipment humming softly in the distance. I catch a faint scent of organic solvents. P5 tracks my location precisely, for what that's worth. When we come to a halt, I'm pushed down into an armchair, and the gun is shifted to my temple. Without any preliminaries, a woman says, "Who hired you?" She's a couple of meters away, facing me directly. "I don't know." She sighs. "What exactly are you hoping for? Do you think you're going to jump through all the technological... Whoops. Do you think we're going to jump through all the technological hoops for you? Truth drugs, truth mods, neural maps, all in pursuit of memories that may or may not have been falsified or erased? If you think you're buying time, you're wrong. I have no interest in spending hundreds of thousands of dollars pissing around with your brain. If you tell us the truth and your story checks out, we'll be lenient. But if you don't cooperate, here and now, we'll kill you. Here and now." She's calm, but not Maud calm. Her tone of pained condescension sounds like a failed attempt to be coolly intimidating, which doesn't necessarily mean that she's bluffing. "I'm telling you the truth. I don't know who my client is. I was hired anonymously." "And you couldn't penetrate that anonymity?" "It wasn't my job to try." "All right. But you must have formed some kind of working hypothesis. Who do you suspect?" "Someone who believed that Laura was taken by mistake. Someone who was afraid that their own relative in the Hilgeman was the real target."
"Who specifically?"
I never came up with a likely candidate. Whoever it was, they would have done their best to hide the family connection. The whole idea that the kidnappers might have taken the wrong person would only make sense to someone who'd gone to great lengths to conceal their relative's identity. I didn't pursue it. I had better things to do." She hesitates, then lets that pass.
"How did you trace Laura to us?"
I explain at length about the cargo x-rays and the drug supplier's records.
"And who else knows all this?"
Any invented confidant would easily be revealed as fictitious. I could claim to have software, running on a public network, camouflaged and invulnerable, ready to tell all to the NHK police in the event of my disappearance, but that wouldn't be much of a threat. If I'd had enough evidence to convince the cops, I would have taken it to them in the first place, instead of breaking in. "Nobody."
"How did you get into the building?"
Again, I have nothing to gain by lying. They must have pieced together most of the details by now. Confirming what they already know can only make me seem more credible.
"What do you know about the work we do here?"
Only what's advertised. Contract biological research.
"So why do you think we're interested in Laura Andrews?"
I haven't been able to work that out.
"You must have a theory."
Not anymore. There are specialist mods for lying convincingly, for responding like a normal human being confidently telling the truth in terms of voice stress patterns, skin temperature, heart rate, etc. But I have no need of one. P3 alone makes all such variables utterly opaque. Nothing that stands up to the facts.
"No."
I have no shortage of unlikely explanations to offer in support of my ignorance. I recount every hypothesis that's passed through my head in the last 8 days, however lame, save Company X and its birth defect suit, and Laura the escapologist. I almost go so far as to mention my fear of the children's involvement, but I stop myself. It seems so ridiculous now that I'm sure it would sound like an obvious lie. When I finally shut up, the woman says,
"Okay."
but not to me. My guard takes the gun away from my head, but doesn't move me from the chair, and I suddenly realize what's about to happen. I suffer a brief moment of pure frustration. Unconscious most of the time, blindfolded the rest, how am I ever going to find out anything? Before P3 smothers this unproductive sentiment. The needle goes into the vein, the drug flows into my bloodstream. I don't fight it. There's no point. I wake on a bed, not even handcuffed. Not even handcuffed. I glance around. I'm in a small, almost empty flat. A man I haven't seen before is sitting on a chair in the corner of the room, watching me expressionlessly, resting a gun on his knee. I can hear street sounds from below, maybe 15 or 20 stories down. It's 7:47, January 6th. I rise and head for the bathroom. The guard makes no move to stop me. There's a toilet, a shower, a sink, a non-opening window about 30 centimeters square, the pane dimpled so that it passes no clear image. A ventilation grill in the ceiling, half the size of the window. I urinate and wash my hands and face. With the water still running, I quickly search the room, but there's nothing that could be remotely useful as a weapon. The rest of the flat is a single room, with a kitchen in one corner, a small refrigerator, unplugged, with the door ajar, a microwave and hot plates built into the bench top. There's a window above the sink, covered by closed Venetian blinds. I start toward this area, but the guard says, "There's nothing there you need. Breakfast is on its way." I nod and turn back. I pace beside the bed, stretching cramped muscles. Shortly afterward, another man brings in a carton packed with assorted fast food and coffee. I eat sitting on the bed. The guard doesn't join in and ignores my attempts at conversation. His eyes move only to follow me, so at times his eyes move only to follow me. So at times he appears as oh my god, why am I having so much difficulty here? Let's try this again. His eyes move only to follow me. So at times he appears as if he's in wow. So at times he appears almost as if he's in a kind of stupor. Why is this so hard? But I know precisely how alert he really is. I've spent enough 12-hour stakeouts in a similar condition. When a mod grants you vigilance, you're literally incapable of anything less. Boredom, distraction, and impatience have simply become inaccessible modes of thought. Unprimed, I may joke about zombies. But primed, I have no doubt that this is where the real strength of neurotechnology lies. Not in the creation of exotic new mental states, but in the conscious, deliberate restriction of possibilities. In focusing and empowering the act of choice. I half expect to be drugged, yet again, as soon as I've finished eating. But this doesn't happen. I don't push my luck. I lie on the bed and gaze at the ceiling like a model prisoner, obviating any need for restraint. I have no intention of causing my captors the slightest difficulty, until the odds are a great deal better that it would do me some good. And if no such opportunity arises? What happens if I can't escape? Killing me would be the simplest choice in most respects, but what are the alternatives? What could my interrogator's promise of leniency entail, assuming, for the sake of speculation, that it meant anything at all? A memory wipe, perhaps. A crude one. If BDI aren't willing to spend a fortune mapping my brain to extract information for their own benefit, they're hardly going to do so out of concern for the integrity of my personality. Natural human memory didn't evolve with any reason to be easily reversible. Eliminating a given piece of knowledge while leaving everything else intact is a massive computational task. The only way to be cheap and thorough is to cut a wide swath. Dead, brain-wiped, or free, in order of decreasing probability. So how do I change the odds? How can I hope to discover, or invent,
A reason for my captors to keep me alive and intact when I still don't know who they are and what they're doing. And how can I hope to find that out when I have no means of gathering data? I still have Culex's snapshots in my head. I go through them again, one by one, on the chance that I might have missed something crucial. All the shots of workstation screens are packed with information, but DNA sequences, protein models, and neural maps don't mean a lot to me. I can read them, in the sense that a child can spell out the individual letters of even the most difficult piece of text, but I don't stand a chance of recognizing any of the structures portrayed, let alone deducing anything about their function or context. I'm fed again. The guard is changed. I shuffle the facts for hours, but nothing new crystallizes out of the contradictions. Escape remains as unlikely as ever. Rushing the guard would be suicide. Crashing through the window and falling to the street would be marginally less likely to kill me, except that I'd probably be shot halfway across the room. As the possibilities thin out, P3 seems to be dragging me further and further into a state of detachment. It wants me to gather more data, but it knows that I can't. It wants me to concentrate on plausible strategies for survival, but acknowledges that there are none. What's it going to do when all of its goals have been ruled out, when all of its elaborate optimization criteria have been rendered meaningless? Shut down? Bow out? Leave me to make my own choice between equally futile options? Toward evening, the man who led me to the interrogation yesterday comes into the room. He tosses a pair of handcuffs onto the bed. Put them on, behind your back. What now? More questioning? I stand, pick up the cuffs. Pick up the cuffs. Blech. The other guard aims his weapon at my forehead and flicks it onto auto. Where are you taking me? Nobody replies. I hesitate, then snap on the cuffs. The first man approaches me, producing a hypodermic capsule. It all seems almost familiar by now. Yeah, the same old routine. Nothing to fear. What better way to do it? The capsule is the same pale blue as before, but his grip conceals the markings. Can't you tell me where I'm going? He ignores me, unsheathes the capsule. He looks right at me, but his mods have pared him down until there's nothing left for his eyes to betray. I just... He places two fingers on my neck and stretches the skin. I say evenly, I want to speak to your boss again. There's something I didn't tell her. Something important I have to explain. No reaction. The gun is still on auto. If I struggle, I'm dead for sure. The needle goes in. There's nothing to do but wait. I open my eyes and blink at the bright ceiling, then look around. I haven't even been moved. I am deprimed, though. It's 1603, January 7th. The guard's chair, still in place, is empty. I lie perfectly still for a while, feeling numb and disoriented. When I try to get to my feet, I find that I'm weaker than I realized. I sit on the edge of the bed, with my head on my knees, trying to clear my thoughts. A wave of pure, suffocating claustrophobia passes through me. I would have died like a good little robot. That's the worst of it. The way I calmly accepted the loss of hope, the narrowing of possibilities, every step of the way. I would have dug my own fucking grave if they'd asked me. But they didn't. So why am I alive? What was I sedated for? If my memory has been tampered with, they've done a seamless job. An unlikely feat in a day. Then again, maybe they've spent a year on it, and everything that persuades me otherwise is a fabrication. I look up as the door opens. The guard who injected me yesterday comes in. He's armed, but his weapon is holstered, as if he knows what state I'm in. Maybe they've maybe they've dissolved my priming mods. I query P3. It still exists. I stop short of invoking it. I stop short of invoking it. He tosses something at me. I don't even try to catch it. It lands at my feet. A magnetic key. That's for the front door, he says. I stare at him. He seems almost embarrassed. Whatever behavioral mods I've seen him with before, I'd say they're shut down now. He grabs the chair from the corner of the room and puts it beside the bed, then sits facing me. Take it easy, okay? My name's Huang Qing. Huang Qing. My name's Huang Qing. I've got something to tell you. What? I'm beginning to think I know the answer, and I think again about priming, to cushion the blow, to keep myself from going into shock, but then it occurs to me that there's probably no need. He says warily, You've been recruited by the ensemble. The ensemble. The phrase dances through my head, pushing buttons and tripping switches. For an instant, all this sparkling new machinery is clearly visible to me, perfectly delineated, separate and comprehensible. Although maybe this is just a delusion, a side effect, a glitch. In any case, a moment later the insight, or mirage, is gone, and I could no more describe the minutiae of what's been done to me than I could determine, by introspection, which neurons make my bowels move or my heart beat. You okay? I'm fine. And it's true, I am. I feel a kind of abstract horror and a remote, almost dutiful outrage. But the sheer relief of finally knowing my fate and understanding the sense of it outweighs both. This is what they meant by leniency. I'm alive. My memory is intact. Nothing has been taken away from me, but something has been added. I have no idea what the ensemble is, except that it's the most important thing in my life. Dun 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 dun. And that is the end of part one of the novel. Part two will be next time, as well as chapter five, six, and probably seven. All right, yeah. So again, really short one this time, only about an hour. Um, Partly due to bad planning on my part, partly due to other things. So yeah, Greg Egan has toyed with this idea of changing your value sets, like in the short story Axiomatic, which incidentally has a short film now that somebody made, which I have yet to see, but somebody clued me in that it exists, and I have to find it and see it. Um, it's like I don't know, 15 minutes long or something. It's short, uh, and it changes the plot a little bit, but that's fine. Uh, but pretty cool. It's like the original short story is basically about somebody who I think they want to kill someone, and because of the way their beliefs work and everything, um, you know, being a decent, upstanding human being, they find the idea of killing someone repulsive. But they absolutely want this person removed. They want this person killed. I think they killed their wife or something. Um, I don't remember for sure off the top of my head. I actually have that short story as well as the short story collection, the titular short story collection it comes from, uploaded on my YouTube channel. It should be. Oh shoot! I don't think I have those organized in their own little sub playlists. I should really get around to doing that. That shouldn't be too hard to do. I just have to find them. They're years back now. In any case, they go through a axiomatic modification procedure which changes their value sets to make them much more capable of moida. So Greg Egan has toyed with this idea before. Uh, so pretty good stuff. I think it's absolutely terrifying. Like the idea of agnosias, where you just like you're going about your day and then you go about your life and then suddenly uh, your brain no longer recognizes things that you used to hold near and dear to your heart, and nothing is, people aren't familiar to you and they just look kind of like
you've lived with someone for 20 years and then suddenly it's like I don't know who this stranger is. Agnosias scare the absolute bejesus out of me. It's got to be like it's like philosophically one of the scariest concepts I can imagine. Like because so much of the human experience is, our attachments, our bonds, our memories, what makes us us. The idea of just, I mean, you there would be terrified too because this person would be there and be, very Kafkaesque. It's like, you don't know me. I've lived with you for 20 years. And you're like, I have never seen you before in my life because your brain absolutely insists this is the case, even though you have actually spent 20 years with this person. It's just, oh, very cool stuff. Very disconcerting to think about just fundamental us tr- how fundamental the concept of us trusting our senses and what our brains tell us is true is to our core experience. Uh, Peter Watts has acknowledged this a bit in at least Blind Sight and a bit in Echopraxia, sequel to those when. It's going to be called Omniscience, I know that, but who knows? Presumably still working on them. I haven't checked his blog in like the better part of a month. Let's check Rifters. But yeah, definitely check out Greg Egan as an author. You can get a lot of his short stories right on his website. Oh, his on his we. Ooh. Wow, I can't talk today. This is so bad. On his website, his website, which is Frag. What is his website? Greg Egan. Greg Egan.net. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. GregEgan.net. www.gregegan.net. Definitely worth checking out. He's got a bunch of his short stories on there, as well as bibliography listing which short stories are in what collections, so you can choose which short story collections to go for when you're looking for them. I still have not read his newest novel, The Book of All Skies. I promise I'll get to it eventually. I probably won't read it aloud here for a while because a lot of his stuff I need time. Ooh, he has a new short story out this month, Dream Factory. I'll have to read that next time. And it's a fairly meaty one. I'll have to check that out. Alrighty, so yeah, thanks again for tuning in. I got a scooch. I do this every Friday on Free Read Fridays. Where I read short stories and indeed entire novels aloud. Right now, we're doing a read through of Quarantine by Greg Egan, and that can expect to take at least 3 to 4 more installments. Wow, the language centers in my brain aren't working today, which is bad considering I have to like conduct interviews in a couple hours. So that'll be fun. Um, I also have other streams throughout the week. I've got Mecha Mondays where I do something giant robot related or mecha adjacent this coming Monday. I'm not actually sure what I'm doing. You'll find out when I know. It'll have something mecha in it. Um, Stompy robots will be involved somewhere. I'm sure of this. Um, and I also have a Warframe Wednesday stream. Uh, all of them I started about noon Eastern Standard Time. Usually lately I've been a couple minutes late. I try not to be, but it's just what happens. Um, and I usually run about 2 hours. Today is an exception. Um, Next week I don't think, have my Warframe Wednesday stream because I've got, think it's a really dense schedule chunk, and I don't think I can scrape the time aside. It's some stuff that I planned for earlier and then forgot about, and then was like, oh shoot, I've got to. If something's got to go, this one has to, I'm afraid. Alrighty. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Have a good one. Stay safe, stay sane. Uh, be decent to each other, you know, and don't let the world get you down. Alrighty. See y'all.